Have you ever wondered if there's an easier way to get views on YouTube? Well, after making over 300 videos and generating hundreds of millions of views, I discovered one thing that changed everything. It keeps people watching, gets you more comments, likes, and shares, and ultimately it blows up your channel. So to help make and growing your business's YouTube journey 10 times easier, here are some quick-fire storytelling lessons I learned that will help you do just that. So to understand why storytelling is so powerful on YouTube, answer this. Why do you keep watching a movie after it starts? Well, it's because you want to know what happens at the end of it, right? Now, compare that to YouTube, where we know that the secret to getting more views is keeping people watching as long as possible. That means stories are the perfect tool to achieve this because that's kind of their whole point, getting people to the end. So lesson number one is just to understand that if you use stories in your content, you can build more watch time simply because people want to find out what happens next. But what is it about stories that make people glued to the screen for longer? Well, I'm going to show you. Listen to this clip, and then I'm going to read your mind and tell you what you're thinking. So in 1922, archaeologist Howard Carter stood in front of a sealed tomb in Egypt. Untouched for over 1,000 years, he opened the door and stood in silence, and his trusty companion asked, "What do you see?" And he paused and whispered, "Wonderful things." All right, mind reading complete. Oh, Jenny, you are foul. I can't say what you were thinking, Jenny, but also thanks for noticing. I've been working out. The rest of you, though, you were thinking, well, what's inside the tomb, right? And that's why stories are so powerful, because they make people curious, and then that then keeps their attention and makes them watch for longer. So when you're telling a story, the first thing you ask is, how can I make people curious so that they want to keep watching? This is why so many YouTube videos start with a question like, how did this YouTuber go from 0 to 1 million views a month? Because simple questions that lead into your story can hook the viewers instantly and make them care about listening to it. But what kind of stories can you tell in a video to get big views? Well, the first one works like this. Years ago, I was seen as a joke. Nobody took me seriously because I was talking about making videos and trying to go on YouTube, but I didn't really get many views. So to prove that I knew my stuff, I told a story about monetizing a brand new channel as fast as I could, and it went viral. The result wasn't just the views though. Suddenly, people started to take me way more seriously, and my business grew so much faster as I now had this big proof of result. So if you want to build massive credibility in your niche, tell a story about how you achieved a result your viewers want too. But how do you come up with one? Well, just try telling the story of the first failure that comes to your mind that relates to the problem your channel solves, and say what you learned from it. The thing is, even with proof I wasn't a phony, I still got a ton of hate in the comments, people saying, if you're that good, blow up someone else's channel. Thanks, guys. So I did. I made a video documenting how I blew up someone else's channel, and then that built even more proof and credibility and mega views again. So this lesson is all about telling stories that show how you got a result for someone else, a result your viewers want too. And to do that, you just ask yourself this question: what's the fastest or biggest result I've ever gotten a client? And just tell that. But what if you don't have any success stories? Well, don't panic, because after spending months working on these videos, I wanted to find a way that was way easier to get big views in less time. So I found a very big problem my viewers had, and then told someone else's story about how they solved it, and wham, it worked. So if you don't have a success story, don't worry. Use this lesson to tell someone else's, and then use it to raise your credibility and keep people hooked. The thing is, for all of these, you kind of have to be aware of one thing. Has anyone ever told you what happens at the end of a movie before you've seen it, and then you watched it anyway? It's not quite the same, right? It's a little bit boring. So this is why you always want to find unique stories to tell that people haven't heard, because if they don't know the ending, that always keeps them more interested. So another story about Elon Musk doing something cool that everyone knows is just not that effective. But how do you tell unique stories? Well, you can go to ChatGPT and just tell it the point you want to make, and then ask it to tell you some real-life true stories about people who've solved that problem. It's usually going to fire out stories that you've heard a million times before, but keep doing it until you read one and go, oh, that's interesting, I didn't know that. That's your story. The thing is, if you tell your own story about you having a problem, doesn't that wreck your credibility? Because you're supposed to be the expert, right? Well, I once made a video where I traveled back in time with a bucket on my head to watch myself making dumb YouTube mistakes. And when I posted it, I was scared because I was openly saying I sucked at this, but the response it got was unbelievable. The video did amazing. I got emails from people saying, Ed, seeing how you struggled in the same way I do makes me feel so good about myself. And because the response was so strong, I just kept making videos in the same way, which generated millions and millions of views. When viewers see you as someone who's on their level, who's been where they are, who's now where they want to be, and who understands what it's like to be where they are, you become much more relatable, and relatable characters build amazing stories. So use your mistakes to your advantage, whilst everyone else in your niche will try and look perfect. It's a winner-winner chicken dinner, that one. But does that mean your entire video has to be a giant story like the 3 examples I've showed? Well, have you seen Finding Nemo? Marlin's son, Nemo, gets taken by a diver, so he then roams the ocean trying to find him, and along the way he has to face sharks and put up with like a forgetful fish, navigate a jellyfish forest, until he eventually finds his son and the two are reunited. So looking at that, I just told an entire story in 2 sentences, yet Disney turned it into a 90-minute epic. And that's the thing about storytelling. You could make an entire video that tells one story from start to finish, or you can use very short ones to help you make your point, like I've been doing this entire video. Now, if you really want to go deeper on this, I've highlighted every example of storytelling in the script that you're watching right now on a document. You can download it below. And that means if you're new to storytelling, just keep things very simple to start and tell a story in a few lines before you jump into more complex beasts. But how will you structure that story? Well, have you ever seen the movie Taken? Brian Mill's daughter's kidnapped, so he goes on an adventure to rescue her, and they end up back together. It's basically Finding Nemo, but with more guns. And that's the truth about stories. They often just follow a very similar structure. And you can follow it too by making your intro, firstly, set up the hero. So who is this story going to be about? In Nemo, it's Marlin. And then set up the problem they have, which in Nemo was Marlin lost his son. And then set up why they need to solve it. And in Nemo, it was so his son doesn't die, and I guess they can see each other again. And then after that, you move on to showing the problems they came up against along the way, trying to solve their problem in the middle. So Marlin had to deal with like sharks and forgetful fish and jellyfish and all sorts of other things. It's quite the adventure. And then after that, you move on to the end and just reveal what happened. So this lesson here is really, you just need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you're off. But then you want to make sure there is a turbocharger strapped to this for epic watch time. So let me show you how this works with a story as an example. So in 1970, Apollo 13 was on its way to the moon when it struck disaster. An oxygen tank exploded, it crippled the spaceship, and it left the astronauts stranded in space. Suddenly, their mission wasn't about landing on the moon anymore, it was about survival. And now just imagine this story was just NASA's trip to the moon, and they took off, and they floated to the moon, and they got there, and then came back. Would anyone still be talking about that in the same way as they do Apollo 13? Probably not. So when your story has stakes, and they rise, people care about it. If it doesn't have any, they don't. So what you want to do is at the very beginning of your story, when you're planning it, clearly define what could have been gained or lost by the hero. For example, if Pat didn't make $10,000 in 30 days, their business would shut down. Then just say why it matters that they fix it, which I've kind of already done there, but we can raise the stakes and say, and with only $40 in his bank and a family to feed, something had to change fast. The thing is, how do you know if the story you're going to tell is actually going to be interesting? Because stories are not powerful if they're dull. Well, in the film The Pursuit of Happiness, Will Smith's character is homeless and he's sleeping in a subway bathroom and he's struggling to feed his son because he spent too much time messing around with a Rubik's Cube. But by the end of the movie, he has achieved his dream of becoming a successful stockbroker. Now, imagine if the whole movie was just about him and his Rubik's Cube doing okay, making steady progress up the career ladder until he eventually got the job he wanted. It'd be boring, right? Like, that's not interesting. So really, the contrast between the depths of despair at the start and the heights of his triumph is what makes a story so powerful. So a question you can ask to work out if your story is actually going to be that interesting is, how much of a contrast is there between the beginning and the end? And if there's not much, I probably wouldn't tell it. But contrast is just one part to this. The real magic happens when you bolt on this next lesson. So do you want viewers to not just remember your video, but hit them so deeply it changes their life? Well, to do that, let me tell you a little secret. Finding Nemo isn't a story about Nemo the fish. It's not even a story about his dad. And what makes stories incredibly powerful is, depending on who's watching that film, it's actually a different story being told. So for parents, it's about how overprotectiveness can stifle a child's growth. For children, it's about learning that while independence is important, understanding and appreciating parental concerns helps them have a stronger bond. And for everyone else, it's about trusting others, embracing collaboration, and stepping out of your comfort zone. So the real magic of Finding Nemo isn't in the finding of the fish, it's in how Marlin, the overprotective father, changes by the end of the movie. He learns to trust his son, so he lets go of his fears and he grows. So here's the lesson. Your story needs to show a transformation in your hero. And the cool thing about this is if your hero fails to achieve their goal, it doesn't matter if they've learned something or grown or changed, because your audience will feel that and they too will learn the same lesson. And that's what makes a really powerful story, especially for businesses, because it hits people on an emotional level. But here is the tricky part. How do you craft a story that makes that transformation clear, keeps viewers hooked, and avoids unnecessary fluff? Well, you just start with the end and the transformation that you want to show happen in your story, and then you plan your beginning and middle. If you do it this way, it means you only ever include critical information in your story that drives people from the start to the transformation. This also means you won't waffle or go off on tangents because it's so clear where your story needs to end up. And to really level this up, try this. Have you seen the TV show Penguin? Oh my gosh. If you've not, you gotta check it out. I finished it a month ago, and I think I'm still thinking about it. And that's what this next lesson's about. The Penguin, Sixth Sense, Fight Club, Primal Fear, The Red Wedding, and Game of Thrones. All of these are famous for one thing, the ending. But why? Well, it's because if you want to tell an amazing story that people don't forget, then a totally unexpected ending will do that. So when you're looking for your stories to tell, if you can find one that has a big twist at the end, you gotta tell it. The thing is, even with a unique story and your structure sorted and an amazing transformation, you can still screw all of this up with the way you write your story. So here are some lessons to help you master that. Okay, so imagine listening to a story that was like this. This story is about success. It's a great story. You'll learn from it. Success is possible for everyone. Just do the work, keep trying. Versus a story like this. This is a story about success which is possible for anyone, but only if you're willing to do the work. Sentences of the same length create a predictable rhythm that subconsciously bores your viewers, meaning that the rhythm of your writing can really make a massive difference for retention. But the cool thing is, there's a really easy way to keep track of this. So look at this document on screen right now. By simply breaking up your script, you can see when sentence length is the same and repeating over and over again, making it easier to spot and fix repetitive rhythm. But rhythm is just one part to this. You also have to fix this. Let's just rewind this video back a little bit and look at a sentence I just said, which was this. Sentences of the same length can create a predictable rhythm that subconsciously bores your viewers, meaning that the rhythm of your writing can really make a massive difference for retention. If a sentence is so wordy it's hard for you to say, which that was by the way, it's going to be hard for the viewers to listen to. So when you write, you really want to simplify your language down so that everything is just incredibly easy to understand. That means dropping long words, industry terms, and that means the sentence should have really sounded like this. Using sentences of the same length can bore viewers, so mix them up to keep their attention. So much easier, right? The cool thing is, if you struggle to do this, just whack your sentence into ChatGPT and ask it to simplify it for you like I just did right then. But writing is just the start. Now I'm going to give you some lessons that are a little bit more advanced, but will transform the experience for the viewers. All right, so watch this clip.
A snake's eyes aren't very good, but they can detect movement. So if the hatchling keeps its nerve, it may just avoid detection.
Now watch it again. Oh wow, check out this little blighter's gonna get annihilated. The reason people love Attenborough and Morgan Freeman isn't because of the words that they say, it's the way that they say them. And what that means is when you're telling your story, you need your tone to complement the situation. Because if you're all happy clappy when the hero's at their darkest moment, it's gonna kill your story and it's gonna put off your viewers. But how do you put all of this together to tell an epic story? Well, watch this video next where I break down exactly how I told stories about solving my own problems that generated millions of views.